Black Hearts in Battersea by Joan Aiken, Chapter 11. Sophie was puzzled. She had been staying at the Cobbs for 5 days now, during which time Simon had not once come to see her or to work in Mr. Cobb's yard. Mr. Cobb was puzzled too. "Simon's a regular working cove in the usual way. I hope there's naught amiss," he muttered, looking with knit brows at the panel of brocade, at the panel of barouche which Sophie had been in process of adorning with a viscount's coat of arms. "Here's this a job, promised to Lord Thingamabob, for Tuesday, and it looks like I'll be obleeged to cry rope, which ain't my way. I hope the boy's all right. Hey, Sophie, lass, how about your taking a hack, here's a crown for the fare, and tooling round to Southwark to see if he's sick abed?" Sophie agreed with alacrity, and was about to fetch her bonnet when a small grubby boy sidled into Mr. Cobb's yard and made his way toward her. "Is you Miss Sophie?" he asked, fixing her with a piercing eye. "Yes, I am," she replied. "What can I do for you?" "You're sure as how you're Miss Sophie, 'cause I wasn't to give it to no one else. And Croopus, I've had such a time finding you. First I axes at the castle. Nobody gammons. Nearly gets chucked in a horse trough for me trouble. Then a gaffer says to come here. Is she Miss Sophie?" he demanded of Mr. Cobb. "Miss Sophie she be," Mr. Cobb answered heartily. "Then I can give it you." He handed her a very dirty folded bit of paper, and added hopefully, "She says as you was very kind, and 'd likely give me a farden, and please, I couldn't come afore today. My gammy's that strict. I couldn't give her the slip, but today she's laid up with a proud toe." Sophie laughed at this and gave him 6pence, saying, "Thank you, my dear. Here you are, then buy yourself some Banbury cakes. But who told you to come?" He looked conspiratorially around the yard, sank his voice to a whisper, and said, "Why, she done. Young Dido Dwight, but she's gone now, along with the others." Then he bolted off between the carriages and vanished out of the gate. Sophie opened the note, which was addressed in staggering capitals to Ms. Sophie. "Dear Miss Sophie, I thanks you onst again for the dress. It's real prime, first new dress I ever was give. Simon has been kidnapped in a ship. Me and Justin is going for a lark. I like Simon, and it isn't fair he should be all alone. The ship is the Dark Dew. Yours respectfully, Dido Dwight." "Good gracious!" exclaimed Sophie, when she had read the letter twice. "He has been kidnapped, and Justin too. Can it be true? I must inform her Grace." "Kidnapped, young Simon?" Mr. Cobb fairly gaped at her. "Yes, on board a ship called the Dark Dew. Do you know of such a vessel?" "Baringo, yes. She and a couple of others belong to that shifty, heavy-caving Nathaniel Dark, the one who ran off with Buckle's wife." "Mr. Buckle? Justin's tutor? I didn't know he'd ever been married," said Sophie, momentarily diverted from her worry. "It was years ago. Buckle was glad to be rid of the woman, but by all I hear, she never stopped talking. Dear knows what Nat Dark did with her, for he didn't marry her. Left her in furrin parts, I dare say. He's a dicey cove, up to the teeth with the Hanoverians, too. That settles it," said Mr. Cobb, grabbing his hat from a mounting block and cramming it on his head. "I'm for Bow Street. Young Salmon and said some at once about the Hanoverians." "The Twites in Rose Alley," said Sophie, nodding. "Ah, and I said leave well alone, but when it comes to kidnapping, it's as plain as pack what's happened. He's twigged their lay and been put away." "And where will they have taken him?" "Ah, there, lass, now you're asking. Those dark ships goes coasting all the way up to Newcastle, and then again to Hanover. They might put him anywhere that's awkward to get at. Only thing is, nobble the bunch at Rose Alley, you say, and winch him tight till they let on where he's to. I'll be off to Bow Street." Mr. Cobb started for the gate, then paused to ask, "Was you wishful to see me, Jem?" "Only to ask "Was his Grace's curricle ready yet, Mr. Cobb?" said Jem, coming out from behind a pile of wheels. "Ready this evening, tell Mr. Waters." Jem nodded and followed Mr. Cobb into the street, where he set off at a run toward the castle. Sophie was not long in following him. Inquiring for their Graces, however, she learned that they were calling on His Majesty. Not surprisingly, the castle was in an uproar over the disappearance of Lord Bakerloo, and the Duke had gone to ask that a national proclamation be made offering a reward for information as to the whereabouts of the Battersea heir. Sophie found the Duchess's embroidery, which was suffering from a week's neglect, and sat putting it to rights in the library, waiting for their Graces to return. The whole chamber was still stacked high with piles of pictures, which the Academy students had taken down during their vain hunt for the Riviera. There had been no time to rehang them in the more urgent search for Justin. Sophie established with her embroidery on a footstool by the fire, was screened by a pile of canvases from a view of anybody entering the room. Presently she heard two people speaking in low tones. "This has put a crimp in our plan," a voice said angrily. "What was that fool Dark about not to notice he'd two other brats on board, and Justin of all people? It couldn't be worse." Sophie recognized Midwink's tones. "What I'll do to that boy when I catch him," the other speaker was Mr. Buckle. "The whole thing nearly in our hands, and he has to run off like a gutter snipe. If those students hadn't been on the river bank the other day, or if that meddlesome girl hadn't gone to the opera, Justin would have been Duke of Battersea by now, and we'd be in Clover. Well, as things are, he's not," said Midwink sourly. "And the old boy's still alive until we get Justin back. We'd best keep him alive. We don't want some cousin stepping in and claiming the dukedom. I've got a poison, but I won't use it till the Duke brings back the boy." "I only hope Dark has the sense to do so," Buckle said with a curse. "It drives me wild having to rely on such a nabblehead. And now we've got to shift the Ken from Rose Alley, and if Jem doesn't warn Ella before the Bow Street runners get there—" "Jem's trusty enough," Midwink said. "He took the Duke's fastest chaser. He'll be there by now. Where did you tell Ella to take the stuff?" Buckle sank his voice to a murmur, and Sophie could only catch the words, "Vegetable cart." Midwink gave a cackle of laughter and said, "Ha, ha, 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 ha! They'll never think of looking there. But are you sure no one will blab?" "I don't believe there's a soul in the castle that's not a Hanoverian to the hilt," Buckle replied, barring the girl. "Now, as to my plan, as soon as we hear from Dark that he has Justin safe, if we hear before the mince pie ceremony—" "Aha! You mean to poison the Christmas mince pies?" "No, better than that." Buckle dropped his voice again, and Sophie missed the next words he ended. "All sky-high together, and the wench as well. My heart's in my mouth now every time the Duchess looks at her. Why she had to pick that one, out of all the paupers at Gluber's. I thought she'd died in the woods, but it must be." "Hush!" said Midwink. "Is that the carriage? Best not be found here." The two men left the room. Sophie remained where she was, almost paralyzed by fear and astonishment. So Buckle was at the bottom of the plot. Buckle and Midwink, and Jem was with them, and had galloped off to warn the Twites to leave Rose Alley. And every servant in the castle, almost everybody, was a Hanoverian to the hilt. Moreover, it was plain that the Duke and Duchess were in grave danger. 2 attempts at murder had only accidentally failed, and a third, somehow connected with mince pies, was merely postponed until Justin's return. Why Justin? Sophie wondered, and then realized that if Justin became the 6th Duke of Battersea following the murder of his uncle, he would still be under his tutor's thumb, that Buckle would in fact control all the ducal power and money. Perhaps it was a blessing, then, that Justin had run away. But meantime, how to protect the helpless elderly Duke and Duchess? The Duke had the greatest respect for Buckle, and would be most unlikely to believe any accusation against him, unless it were backed by positive proof. Perhaps the raid on Rose Alley would provide this. If not, it seemed to Sophie that the best plan would be to get the Duke and Duchess away from Battersea. But how was this to be achieved? Her thoughts were interrupted by the Duchess, who arrived in a great bustle. "Ah, there you are, Sophie, dear child. I am so delighted to see you again." We are to depart instantly for Chippings. His Majesty very sensibly suggested that naughty Justin might have run off there for a bit of wolf hunting. Pack me up a few odds and ends, will you, my dear? Just for a night or two, warm things. It will be cold in the north. Don't forget the croquet and my watercolours. Ah, you have the tapestry, that's right. You are to come too, of course, so pack yourself as well. We start as soon as the train is ready. The train, ma'am? Won't His Grace be using the coach? No, he thinks the train will be quicker. He has gone to charter it now. Sophie was thunderstruck. She had never travelled in a train in her life. Indeed, the nearest station to Chippings was at York, over 30 miles away, for the Duke, who considered trains to be dirty, noisy things, flatly refused to have them running over his land. Sophie struggled with her conscience. This seemed a heaven-sent opportunity to get their graces away from trouble, and she was excited at the prospect of the journey, but still it was her duty to mention Dido's letter. She showed it to the Duchess, who read it with astonishment. "Dido Twite! Who is Dido Twite, my child?" "Oh, she is a poor little thing that Simon has befriended, the daughter of his landlady. But why should Simon have been kidnapped? And why should Justin have gone with him? Depend upon it," said the Duchess, "this will turn out to be nothing but a